Looking at the space passage above the ugly building, Captain America, who had experienced many wars, couldn't help but breathe fast. He had never thought that everything he experienced after waking up made him feel a little fantastic. When did the aliens come to the Earth to find work? The loud roar of the beast was transmitted to the ground through the wormhole, and the huge alien biological weapon wrapped in steel armor appeared in everyone's sight. "Stark, do you see that thing?" The captain stared closely at the big guy that was constantly advancing in the air and causing destruction. "Watching it. It just takes me some time to process it." Tony Stark, who was acting as a reconnaissance and strike machine in the air, certainly noticed the thing, not to mention how big it was. For something this big, there are naturally big characters to fight against it, like the big guy who turns green when he gets angry. But why doesn't his hair turn green? Where is Banner? Hasn't he arrived yet? Stark asked the captain and the others. It was a bit abnormal that they hadn't seen the big green guy yet. Unless that guy is on his way, who can directly fight against that big guy? Banner? After hearing the captain's words, Tony already understood that the high-end combat force has not arrived yet. Tony just took a breath and replied to the captain, "Just notify me in time." Jarvis, found. "Sir, there is another energy fluctuation, which is very similar to the energy fluctuation on the building." Jarvis interrupted Tony before he finished his words. At least in Jarvis's opinion, the newly appeared space teleportation event is definitely more important than scanning the weakness of that big thing. Again? Tony really didn't know if these aliens had discussed it and came to invade them today. Do you really think their little ball can be trampled at will? Hey! Tony tried to attract the attention of others on the radio. The captain was the first to respond to him. "Stark, what's wrong? We may face two different waves of aliens. Another space channel has just been opened." Tony still followed the big bug-like thing, but every second, Jarvis paid attention to the place where the energy changed. No one knew what would appear there. The only thing they could do was to pray that another cosmic army would not appear and trap them in a situation where they would be attacked from both sides. Look for yourself. Look at all this. Do you think that just because you are king, the madness will stop? Thor used Mjolnir in his hand to control the scepter in Loki's hand and roared loudly at Loki, who was wearing a staghorn helmet. Loki looked blankly at the ruined New York and said to Thor bitterly, "It's too late. It's too late to stop it. No, as long as we're together." When Thor thought that his brother had really changed his mind, the severe pain in his abdomen told him that he had been deceived by his brother again. "You are still so naive. Obviously, this planet has been targeted by more than one person." Loki whispered to Thor, turned around and jumped, directly boarding the Chitauri's small individual flying vehicle. Thor straightened up and took out the blade stuck in his abdomen. He sighed and looked at the city filled with smoke. He could no longer think too much. The three members of Captain America who were blocking the Chitauri on the ground were already overwhelmed because there were too many guys coming. Patton, wearing a special archery suit, said to Captain America, who had just stopped beside him, "There are civilians trapped inside." Looking at the Chitauri aircraft whizzing past overhead, Captain America said a name with a serious expression, "Loki." Those guys were rampaging on the streets, and there was no direct force on the ground that could directly fight against those aliens. Moreover, there were still many citizens on the streets who had not yet completed their evacuation. The most important thing now was to send those who had not yet completed their evacuation to the evacuation site. They can only be beaten down there, Captain America said meaningfully. The two people around him had already started to clean up the Chitauri in their area, even though there were more and more of those bug-like guys now. "We're here, no problem, just go ahead," Natasha with short wavy red hair said to Captain America. "As long as these guys can be killed with bullets, there will be no problem." "Can you stop them?" Captain America didn't ask Natasha, but asked Patton, who had already found a cover. Patton looked back at Captain America and smiled. "Captain." He pressed his hand on his special bow a few times, and then continued, "I'm happy to do so." After saying that, he stood up, drew his arrow, and shot. Captain America didn't say anything else, but stood up and ran towards the street below. He jumped over the fence, ran on the roof of the bus, and quickly ran towards the rough defense line that had been formed by the NYPD. If those guys could listen to a little bit of his advice, many people could survive in this war. Under normal circumstances, the distance between Captain America's current position and the New York police line would only be enough for him to catch his breath. However, this place has now become a battlefield. When watching a policeman running towards the person who should be the leader in a panic, Captain America probably guessed what they were talking about, which was nothing more than when the support would arrive. Pointing at the backup, it is better to think about how to ensure that more people can survive. Thinking of this, Captain America could not help but speed up his pace. He jumped directly into the car in front of the two policemen who were talking. He didn't bother to introduce himself. Captain America said to them directly, "You need to send people to these buildings. The people in the buildings will be affected by the fire when they escape. Take them to the basement or subway, don't let them come to the street. I need you to seal off this place until 39. My God." Captain America, who originally wanted to blockade 39th Avenue directly, gave up his original idea when he saw a huge cross-shaped unidentified object suddenly appearing in the distance. Now, they have to block the road to at least 44th Avenue. Block the road from here to 44th Avenue. Quickly. Captain America said to the two stunned policemen. The police wanted to ask why he had to obey his orders, but a sudden explosion interrupted him. Then two aliens who looked quite disgusting jumped down and stood next to the guy in the tights who was giving orders to him. Seeing that guy kill the ugly alien in no time, the police realized that maybe it was right to listen to him. He immediately assigned tasks to his policemen and used the intercom to let other policemen start to block the area that the guy mentioned. "Stark, did you see that thing?" Captain America asked Stark in the communication after dealing with a few minions. The appearance of that thing was really a bit weird. Stark naturally knew about the appearance of that thing. After all, that was the place he had always asked Jarvis to pay attention to. "I'll go check it out." Stark answered simply. New York couldn't afford any new alien attacks. "Jarvis, scan that thing." "Sir, that thing can't be scanned." Jarvis' voice rang in Stark's ears. This was the most outrageous thing Stark had heard since the war began. Jarvis could have completely scanned even that giant bug, but now he couldn't even scan a tiny unknown object. From the corner of his eye, Stark saw the huge Chitauri transport ship crashing into the cross-shaped object. But the next moment, the object seemed to hit a barrier, fell straight down, and hit the building heavily. "Sir, that thing has no life signs." Jarvis had already scanned it when it began to fall. Stark couldn't help but slow down when he heard Jarvis' voice. He saw clearly that the Chitauri transport ship fell directly about 1 kilometer away from the unidentified object. In other words, that distance is where the unknown object can attack directly. It's really a tricky thing. Stark is a little confused now. According to the attack range of the unknown object, it is very likely that the thing has no so-called blind spots up, down, left, or right. He was simply a hedgehog that was impossible to deal with. The so-called director of S.H.I.E.L.D., who had been paying attention to the battle in New York, was now frowning as he looked at the guy who suddenly appeared and shot down the Chitauri troop transport ship. Although I don't know why my satellite is completely unable to directly capture the person on that thing, but after zooming in on the photo, it is obvious that there is a person sitting on that thing. The only good news now is the guy doesn't seem to have the intention to take action, and even the big bug was shot down because it entered the counterattack range. So now we can temporarily treat that guy as non-existent. Now is not the time to provoke another unknown force on the Earth. At least we have to deal with those bugs that keep coming out of the wormhole before considering what strategy to adopt against that guy. When necessary, force can also be used to suppress. Director, the board of directors is online. A woman with a neat hairstyle walked up to the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. On the cross throne that everyone feared, a creature that could be called perfect was frowning. However, the green eyeshadow made the face, which should have been more beautiful, look a little more stern. Looking down at the smoke-filled city beneath her feet, Kaisha knew exactly what kind of war this was. It could be said that in her long life, she had seen at least 8,000 wars similar to the current one, if not 10,000. Although pre-nuclear civilizations can effectively counterattack when facing aerospace-class civilizations, it still has no effect. St. Kesha has been detected to have arrived. As Kesha was examining the war below, a purely mechanical synthesized voice rang in her ears. "Shut up." Kaisha spoke softly, but her words made everything feel the wool that could not be violated. After she finished speaking, the voice did not sound again. Observing those beast-like guys again, Kaisha couldn't help but laugh at her initial positioning of those guys. What kind of space-class civilization is it? It's just a pseudo-space civilization at best. If it weren't for the special body structure of these guys, they wouldn't even be able to touch the edge of pseudospace. No wonder they can fight back and forth with pre-nuclear civilizations. However, there is still technological suppression. Even pseudospace civilizations have touched the era of higher-level technology. Although the current Earth can still resist effectively, defeat is inevitable over time. Then the entire civilization was devastated. A light white film covered her pale golden eyes, and Kaisha had already begun to locate those beast-like warriors. The originally azure blue sky was instantly covered with low black clouds. It seemed that the dark clouds could be swept away with a casual scoop. Such a big commotion naturally attracted the attention of the American team fighting on the ground. Besides, they had to pay attention. Now the sky was covered with dark clouds, and the visibility on the entire street had been infinitely reduced. This is definitely not good news for them. What happened? Captain America quickly communicated with the communicator. I don't know. Stark was also confused about the sudden appearance of the dark clouds. But he vaguely felt that the dark clouds in the sky must have something to do with the Cross-Throne. Where's Thor? Captain America suddenly thought of the guy who appeared with a rumbling thunder. He must know something. Boom! A tall figure walked to the side of Captain America with a dull sound of landing. The man with long golden hair and a sledgehammer in his hand said in a deep voice, "It's not me." I don't know. Captain America turned around and saw Thor, who was also confused about the current weather conditions. He could only nod his head, agreeing with what Thor said. Who can tell me what happened? Captain America asked the others using the communicator. But there was only silence in the communication channel. Boom! Captain America was about to say something but was interrupted by the sound of thunder. He looked up at the sky and saw countless thunders rolling in the originally thick dark clouds. Those things seemed to be searching for something and had not landed yet. Or maybe they were waiting for someone's instructions to destroy all the enemies below. Is this something you humans made? Thor really didn't know if he was the god of thunder now. He had never tried thunder of this magnitude. Maybe he could make thunder of the same power, but it was definitely not a simple matter. As a veteran who has been frozen for 70 years, Captain America has no idea how advanced human technology is. The sky carrier he saw before has already shaken his perception. If this thing is also something that human technology can do, then he really thinks he should ask S.H.I.E.L.D. to find him a teacher to learn about the world again. Before Captain America could answer Thor's question, the thunder in the sky began to move. Countless bolts of lightning shot out in all directions, instantly turning the entire city of New York into a pure white. No one could open their eyes to see the current situation. Everyone closed their eyes tightly and waited for the sea of thunder to disappear completely. Even with their eyes closed, they could still feel the light of thunder. However, this thunder bath made the Chitauri feel what it meant to be reduced to ashes. Under the huge thunder, even the 100-meter-long Leviathan was turned into a pool of minced meat under the baptism of thunder. The lightning dissipated, and the dark clouds retreated. The brave ones opened their eyes and saw the streets suddenly calm down, and the occasional lightning flashes on the Leviathan's flesh. What is this? Is it a miracle? Where are the aliens? Are they all dead? The citizens seemed to have regained their courage and slowly walked towards the streets, wanting to see what was going on. Whether those ugly aliens were really destroyed directly in the Sea of Thunder. Captain America and the others who witnessed everything on the street were at a loss for words to describe what they saw. Those lightning bolts attacked with a purpose. Natasha was the closest to the Chitauri, so she naturally felt the lightning bolts that struck and killed the Chitauri. Obviously, she was quite close to those Chitauri, but the lightning seemed to have its own consciousness and directly avoided her and struck the ugly aliens. How Captain America breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed that someone was really helping them. Although they didn't know who did it, it was a real thing. I say, don't relax, the space channel is still open. Stark's voice was like a bucket of cold water poured directly on their heads. The space channel still existed, which meant that the aliens could still re-enter the Earth through that thing. Tut, tut, tut. The sound of a motorcycle suddenly appeared in the surrounding area. A man arrived here on a motorcycle that looked very old. It looks really scary. I don't know if I am late now. The man got off the motorcycle and said to Captain America, who was looking serious, I've seen scarier things. Natasha looked up at the sky with lingering fear, responding to the man's words. The man also knew what she meant, but still said to Natasha, I'm sorry, but it was really scary before. We need a little terror right now. Natasha retracted her gaze and said to the man, Stark, Banner is here. Captain America directly contacted Stark, who had always remembered when Banner arrived. Then let him get ready. Oh. Shit. Stark didn't know what he saw, and he cursed before he finished speaking. Speak properly. Captain America reminded Stark in the voice. That thing is moving. Stark shouted loudly in the voice, not caring whether Captain America was reminding him not to swear. After hearing Stark's words, almost at the same time, everyone looked up at the huge cross throne that was moving towards Stark Building. They didn't know who had created the thunder before, but the things on Stark Building were very important now. It was absolutely impossible to let a guy whose origin was unknown approach easily. If another wormhole was created, no one could bear it. There was another person who couldn't accept it either. It was Loki, who had escaped from the Thunderbolt by using his magic. The entire advance force of the Chitauri died in the inexplicable thunderstorm. This huge loss was a huge blow to the Chitauri army, but the conquest of the Earth could not be stopped. Everyone move out. He could only take out everything he had. The desolate roar of the beast began to resound through the sky, and the huge Leviathan quickly passed through the space channel, and behind it there were endless Leviathans. Loki glanced at the so-called Avengers gathered on the ground, then curled his lips in disdain and fixed his eyes on the huge cross throne that was moving towards Stark Tower. Now, for him, those guys on the ground were just a small matter. The guy who had not shown up was the biggest threat to his trip. He was sure that the previous Sea of Thunder was definitely related to that guy. Kaisha naturally felt a gaze constantly looking at her. She looked in that direction with curiosity and saw a black-haired man wearing a staghorn helmet staring at her. It was just a light glance, and Kaisha immediately looked away. But for Loki, the look he just made with Kaisha was like falling into an ice cave, and his whole body was cold. That look was like looking at his cheap father, and he had no intention of resisting. A dagger suddenly appeared in his hand and stabbed directly into his thigh, which made Loki feel warm again. But it was the blood that warmed him. He looked up, but this time he didn't look at Kesha again. That woman had already regarded him as nothing. Kesha really wouldn't care about a 500-year-old kid, even if he was a so-called god. In Kesha's opinion, that guy was almost a second-generation god. Considering that it was not her universe, maybe there was something she didn't know, so he should be considered a third-generation god? Maybe. So what? It's still just roast goose. Kesha's eyes were now on the device that was maintaining the space channel. The cross throne soon arrived above the Stark Building. As for the Avengers who wanted to stop Kesha at the beginning, they were now entangled by the Chitauri who rushed out of the wormhole. As for Loki, without the scepter in his hand, he did not have the courage to face a guy who was likely to be at the same level as his cheap father. Slowly walking down from the throne, Kesha's silver-white armor was covered with luxurious golden patterns, shining brightly in the sun. A golden logo was embroidered on her scarlet cape. Her combat boots made a crisp sound as they stepped on the gravel on the rooftop of Stark Building. It's beautiful, isn't it? A bald old man looked at the blue cube placed in the space device with fascination. The cosmic cube can allow you to see things far beyond knowledge, those truths. Kesha glanced at the bald old man and walked towards the space device. Truth? I am the truth. When Kesha came to the space device, she lightly tapped the invisible energy shield with her fingers. The light blue energy shield only rippled briefly, then returned to calm, without any counterattack against Kaisha's touch. It's a bit like dark energy. Kaisha experienced the energy reaction, and it can be said that the energy shield in front of her is another way of using energy. It's just that it's not this kind of energy application, it's more like the blue block itself generates energy, and the energy conversion rate is quite high. Energy detected. Do you want to extract? Didn't I tell you to shut up? Kesha retracted her fingers and rubbed her fingertips gently. The radiation frequency and the radiation energy of this energy are exactly gamma radiation. Typical use of dark energy. If that was the case, Kaisha gently raised her hand and pressed on the energy shield. Loki had been paying attention to the actions of the strange woman. After seeing that the woman was also bounced off by the energy shield, he didn't think anything unexpected would happen. If the energy shield of the cosmic cube could be broken so easily, it would not be the cosmic cube. But after seeing Kesha's next move, Loki's heart, which had been relieved, was once again in suspense. Doesn't that woman know what giving up is? She has been rejected by the cosmic cube once, why does she want to do it again? But this time, when Kesha put her hand on it, the energy shield did not react at all, and accepted Kesha's touch quite calmly. This is impossible. Loki lost his composure. No matter who it was, no one could directly touch the energy shield, and they would only be bounced off by the energy shield. This was not only the conclusion reached by the Midgard scientist, but also the understanding gained from Odin's treasure house. Shocked by the scene before him, he completely forgot the panic he had felt when he looked at Kaisha before. Now he had only one thought, which was to stop the woman from continuing. Get out of there. Loki used the Chitauri's individual flying vehicle to fly towards Case's location and launched an attack in the direction of the space device. I hope to use this to directly deflect the woman. The shield will not sit idly by when it is attacked. It will definitely fight back. Unfortunately, the attack has stopped in the distance before it even reaches the roof of Stark building. What Loki couldn't accept the most was that the woman didn't even look back at the direction of the attack, but just kept trying to enter the energy shield. This feeling of being ignored was completely unbearable for Loki. He was always the guy who was ignored, no matter where he was. Kesha didn't know what Loki was thinking at the moment. The hand that was pressing on the energy shield began to continuously probe into the energy shield. The energy shield, which should have reacted violently, didn't care at all about Kesha's hand that kept reaching inside, as if from just now, it had already assumed that Kesha was the same kind as it. In other words, it has accepted Kesha. This is unacceptable to Loki. As long as that woman gets the cosmic cube, all his efforts will be in vain. Loki didn't care about anything now and ran directly to start building. He couldn't accept the possibility of his failure, at least it shouldn't be ruined by a woman of unknown origin. Unfortunately, his plan to contact Kesha directly was disrupted by someone. The guy who disrupted his plan was the last man to report to the battlefield, Bruce Banner. Maybe it would be more appropriate to call him the Hulk now, because his fighting state is to become a complete green monster. The green giant leaped up from the ground and directly smashed the individual flying vehicle that Loki was riding. He even caught Loki, who was adjusting his body with his excellent eyesight, and threw him to the top of a building. Bang! The huge force from the Hulk directly embedded Loki on the rooftop of the building. The Hulk then landed on the building and yelled at Loki, who was trying hard to pull him out. Enough! Loki stood up and roared loudly, "Who do you think you are? I am a god. You idiot. Don't even think about bullying me. You." Before he could finish his words, Hulk rushed to him, grabbed Rocky's ankle, and threw him back and forth. In the end, Rocky was left lying in the pit that Hulk had smashed himself, gasping for breath. Weak God. Even after Hulk smashed Rocky, he only left this comment to Rocky. At this moment, Kesha had successfully reached her hand into the space device and grasped the azure cube that had been supplying energy to the space device. The moment Kesha grasped the object, tremendous energy surged into her body, as if it was going to burst Kesha, who had touched her with her bare hands. In response to the cube releasing energy, Kesha just squeezed it tightly, forcing a crack to appear in it. When the crack appeared, the cube's energy pouring into Kesha's body suddenly stopped. Although it was an unconscious thing, it was surprisingly decisive. Then Kesha pulled the thing out of the space device. The space channel that originally provided continuous energy also lost its stable energy source when Kesha pulled out the cube. The loss of energy caused the space channel to collapse continuously, and the speed of collapse was incredibly fast. When a Leviathan was about to pass through the wormhole to reach the Earth, it was cut in half by the collapsing space channel. When everyone saw the space channel collapse, they all breathed a sigh of relief. Even now, Stark was thinking about where to go for a good meal after the meeting. Although this topic was interrupted by someone and changed to a new topic. For example, find the culprit that caused everything, and the cosmic cube. As for the Chitauri who have entered the Earth, after the space channel collapsed, they have become corpses on the ground. There is no need for Stark and his team to go to the trouble of getting rid of the remaining Chitauri. They just need to clean up these guys who have become corpses. Analyze this so-called cosmic cube. When Kesha took the cube in her hand, she used the Eye of Insight to observe it. However, what she saw was nothing important, just some experiments and names given to it by the Earth. Nothing could be seen of anything older than that. The energy contained in it was enough to arouse Kaisha's interest, especially since it had a hint of spatial properties. It was something that was worth studying. Even someone like Kaisha, who had little interest in research, could not help but be absolutely curious. Open the Sacred Knowledge Treasure House, analyze the cosmic cube, construct the energy extraction channel, extract the energy of the cosmic cube, and start calculation time. 8,712 years. It's really a huge project. Kesha said with a faint smile, not caring at all about the number of years that sounded extremely long. A few thousand years passed in the blink of an eye. Miss Cosplayer, can you give us what you have in your hand? A rather frivolous voice sounded. Wearing red and gold armor and speaking frivolously, no matter how you look at it, this person is not a serious person. When Stark saw Kesha, he couldn't help but admire her. Maybe this is what is called an angel. Kaisha only glanced at Stark in the armor, then looked away and slowly walked towards her cross throne. The cosmic cube in her hand was also directly put into the dark space by Kaisha. This was the first time Stark felt this kind of feeling of being ignored, and it was really unpleasant. "Miss, I'm talking to you." Stark emphasized his words again. "Please give us the things you put away." At this moment, Stark is ready to continue fighting at any time. His palms are open and the palm cannon has begun to accumulate energy, ready to attack Kesha at any time. However, the unfavorable posture was simply treated as air by Kesha and had no deterrent effect at all. "Miss, if you continue like this, your next move may be rather rude." Stark's palm cannon had some overflowing energy particles. She was ready to use the palm cannon in her hand to stop Kesha's actions. "What's wrong? Is the recovery of the cosmic cube not going smoothly?" The voice of the American team sounded on the communication channel. "Someone has already put that thing away. It's obvious that guy has no intention of returning the cosmic cube to us." Stark responded to the captain's question. At this time, Kesha had already sat back on her throne. Amplifiable object detected. "Do you want to amplify the sacred knowledge treasure house?" When Kaisha sat back on the throne, the mechanical sound rang again. Kaisha also roughly understood what the thing was like. It was just a simple mechanical creation, without any so-called intelligent elves. It would simply tell Kesha what would be applicable to her. Kesha sat on the throne, ignoring the so-called Avengers who were gathering here, and prepared to drive her throne away to the sky. "Miss, I didn't ask you to leave." Stark quickly followed Kesha's movements and blocked the direction of Kesha's throne. But even so, Stark didn't see Kesha paying any attention to him, just gently tapping the armrest of the throne. Stark probably understood what those people were thinking when he treated them that way. But now was not the time to experience that feeling. His current mission was to take the cosmic cube away. Stark has no other choice now. The only thing he can do now is to use force to make the woman stop and return the cosmic cube to them. The palm cannon was aimed at the cross throne under Kesha's seat. Stark was also very clear that he had no intention of hurting anyone, but just wanted to get the cosmic cube back. But just as Stark was about to attack, the visor in front of him suddenly disappeared, and all the power disappeared in an instant. "Jarvis?" Stark didn't want to experience another hard landing, so he called Jarvis to see if he could restart directly. Unfortunately, Jarvis didn't respond. All he could feel was the sound of the wind from the rapid descent and the severe feeling of weightlessness. This abnormality naturally attracted the attention of the other Avengers on the ground. Although they didn't know why Stark suddenly lost power, if he dropped at this speed, he would definitely become a meat patty. "I'll catch him." Thor waved his hammer, thinking of catching Stark. But someone was much faster than him. A green figure jumped directly from the tall building and hugged Stark, who fell from the sky. Hulk stopped Stark from falling rapidly. When he landed on the ground, Stark quickly took off his mask and lay there vomiting. This kind of thing was too exciting. He didn't want to experience it again for the second time in his life. No, the third time. "Are you okay?" Captain America asked Stark, who looked distressed. "It's okay. It's just that I can't get the cosmic cube." Stark relaxed and felt his stomach stop churning, then he reluctantly stood up. Captain America doesn't care whether the cosmic cube can be retrieved or not. There is no good use for it. No one has used it in the right way. As for the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., who had just left the conference room, there was no joy at all on his dark face, even though the team he formed showed absolute reliability. But the guy who suddenly appeared and took away the cosmic cube always lingered in his mind. No one could be sure of that person's attitude towards the Earth. Whether the Earthlings were worried or not, it didn't matter to Kesha at all. Now Kesha had more important things to deal with. The Cross Throne was still in the universe, waiting for the Supreme King to complete her task. Kaisha leaned on the back of the throne, closed her eyes and carefully felt the changes in her dark plane. But the dark plane that appeared before her was completely different from what she had expected. Judging from her normal offline state, her dark plane space should have been inherited by Yin. The only reason she was able to keep a treasure trove of sacred knowledge was because it was a celestial-level supercomputer developed from her own genes. The other two weapon arsenals should have simply ceased to exist. Moreover, it was unknown whether the sacred knowledge treasury in the dark plane was in its heyday. It would take more than 8,000 years to analyze an unknown cube. But now the dark plane in front of her is a complete one. Not only does it have a complete treasure trove of sacred knowledge, but even the weapons arsenal also exists in the dark plane. All of this must have been caused by that thing. Kesha looked up at the star that was hanging high above the sacred treasure house of knowledge, as dazzling as the sun. God ascending stairs. The thing felt Kaisha's gaze and responded to Kaisha's name, correcting her way of addressing it. God ascending stairs? That's a really rude name, Kaisha said with a calm smile. As for whether this thing is called the long stairway to God or anything else, what Kaisha needs to know now is how she came to this universe. When she left Earth, she had already tried to use the sacred knowledge treasury to search for traces of surrounding civilizations. In Kaisha's memory, the Liang civilization had descended on Earth when it called itself the Heavenly Tao civilization. Since it had descended on Earth, it must have left traces of civilization directly or indirectly. This kind of trace will not disappear slowly with the passage of time, but will always be engraved in the history of a planet's development. However, this Earth does not have any trace of Liang civilization. In other words, either I have come to an unknown time point in the long river of the universe where I am no longer in the original universe. Suddenly, I thought of the Tin Man blocking the road. He looked a lot like one of the so-called haters who were killed by my unfortunate sister. Does that mean I have come to another universe? A universe without angel civilization? Kaisha hugged her chest and stared at the long steps to the gods that were emitting a blazing glow. The feeling that crossing the universe brought to Kaisha was no less than that of herself when Liang Bing mentioned the so-called ultimate fear. Shaking her head, Kaisha felt the wonder and unpredictability of the world for the first time. The so-called omniscience and omnipotence had no meaning at this moment. The faint smile on Kesha's face completely blossomed at this moment. Justice and order could not continue in that universe, so could it be accomplished here? The brilliant smile at this moment made the dark space, which was originally bright because of the long steps to the gods, add a little softness. So you brought me to this universe, right? Kesha's pure eyes looked at the long steps to the gods. Yes, the mechanical voice sounded. What a concise answer. However, I never believed that anything can be obtained for free. What is the price? Kaisha narrowed her eyes, obviously dissatisfied with the answer of the long step to the gods. But I understand that this is just a simple technological creation. It will answer whatever you ask. After all this effort, it can't be that they have nothing to do. Correct this cosmic order. The answer of that thing surprised Kesha. Correct the cosmic order? Do you need my justice and order? Kaisha said to the long steps of ascension very seriously. Yes, the long steps of ascension's answer was still very concise, but this answer was very much in line with Kaisha's appetite. I don't know who wants me to correct the order of the universe, but Kesha's pale golden eyes flashed with absolute confidence. I like this. Holy Kesha, are you sure? Confirmed. Kesha agreed without hesitation. The long steps to the gods are fully opened, and the light of justice will spread throughout the universe. In Kaisha's eyes, the long steps to the gods, which were originally as bright as the sun, instantly merged into the entire dark space. The dark space, which was supposed to be as dark as the universe, underwent earth-shaking changes when the long steps to the gods merged into it. Huge white marble pillars continued to rise around, as if they would not stop until the chaos was expanded. Changes also began to occur under Kaisha's feet. A huge throne was built under her feet, constantly raising Kaisha's figure. The original sacred knowledge treasury also found its place in the new dark plane, hanging high in the center of the entire dark plane. Right below the sacred knowledge treasury, there was a spherical object that seemed to wrap around the entire universe. In front of the throne, there was a circular seat like a meeting room. Kaisha slowly sat on the newly appeared throne, looking at her own dark plane, and couldn't help but frowned. The dark plane structure in front of her was the royal court in the mellow heaven, except that there were a few more things. The so-called long steps to the gods were like disposable items that were specially sent to this universe to strengthen themselves. And it was obvious that there was no trace of the long steps to the gods in the dark plane now, and it had been completely integrated into the dark plane. Just like the so-called novice gift pack that I saw in Guxiaoluan's head. However, the guy who made that thing obviously knew that I would definitely agree to it. If I didn't agree directly, would the steps to godhood in the future be the same as before, reminding me whenever I encounter something suitable? He raised his head to take a look at his own sacred treasure trove of knowledge that was currently analyzing the so-called cosmic cube, only to discover that the original analysis time of more than 8,000 years had been compressed to only 3 years. This increase is a bit outrageous. Kaisha looked deeply at the treasure house of knowledge and left the dark plane. Kaisha on the throne slowly opened her eyes. Her eyes, which should have been light golden, were as bright and dazzling as cast gold the moment they opened. But the guy she saw when she opened her eyes made Kaisha frown. A blond, strong man floated in front of the throne, staring at her closely. His blue eyes were full of hostility towards Kaisha, but he just barely hid it. Give me the cosmic cube. At this time, Thor was no longer the arrogant prince who first came to Midgard. He knew what was most important and understood that sometimes force was not the best solution. Stark was almost thrown down from the sky by the woman in front of him before, so he couldn't just ignore this matter. She was someone who fought side by side with him. How could she be treated like garbage so casually? Besides, since it was all caused by her brother, there was no way for Thor to look at this woman normally. "You are not qualified to talk to me." Kesha just glanced at Thor and closed her eyes again, completely ignoring the god of thunder. "I am the Prince of Asgard." Thor roared at Kesha. Kesha turned a deaf ear to Thor's roar and closed her eyes to rest. The moment she saw Thor, the eye of insight had already shown the whole life of this big man to Kesha. The 500-year-old guy, who was previously blinded by arrogance, was now a good candidate for the crown prince. If this guy is already the so-called king of Asgard, then he can barely talk to him. Otherwise, the hammer is still a good match for him. "You." It was the first time Thor met someone who looked down on him. The veins in his hand holding Mjolnir were already popping out. But now he still didn't speak like before, only using the hammer in his hand. Thor took a deep breath and said to Kesha, "That thing is very important to us, and we placed it on Midgard. Now I hope you can return it to us." Unfortunately, Kesha ignored his thoughts and maintained her indifferent expression, not caring at all whether Thor was so angry at her current appearance that his veins were bulging and he might attack her at any time. Thor moved a little closer to Kesha, and when he saw that Kesha still didn't care about his actions, he moved quickly towards Kesha, with Mjolnir in his hand ready to go, and even a hint of thunder already appeared. He wanted to hammer this pretentious woman off the sofa-like throne with a hammer. The colorful passage suddenly blocked Thor's way forward. The 8-legged horse Sleipnir jumped high on its front hooves. On its back was a one-eyed old man wearing golden armor and holding the eternal spear Gungnir. The white hair may be messy due to the teleportation of the Rainbow Bridge, but the remaining eye is full of his arrogance. The king of Asgard, the king of the gods of the Aesir, Odin Borson. "Father." Thor looked at his father, who suddenly appeared in front of him, and suddenly remembered that when he attacked Jotunheim, the land of frost giants, Odin also appeared in front of him like this. Just to avoid making a big mistake. Now, is it a mistake to just take back the cosmic cube? Thor was a little confused. He didn't know. Odin looked at Thor, and then set his sights on Kesha, who had opened her eyes and looked at him. Even an old man like him couldn't help but admire the beauty of the unknown person in front of him. But it was only a fleeting admiration, and then he looked at Kesha with a straight face. "Odin." Kesha spoke softly, but it was like a loud bell that shook people's hearts and lungs. Her calm gaze made the king of Asgard feel a little uncomfortable. For many years, except for the bald man on Earth and his queen, no one had ever seen him look at him so calmly. Hearing Kesha calling out his father's name, Thor took a step forward, but was held down by Odin. Although he didn't understand why, Thor still stopped. "I can't tell where you came from," Odin said to Kesha calmly. Odin didn't feel embarrassed at all because he couldn't see Kesha's identity. Kesha just smiled and said, "Are you here to get the cosmic cube back for this kid?" She pointed her slender finger at the blond man who was blocked behind Odin. "No, I'm taking them back. Do you need me to wish you a safe journey?" Kesha leaned back on the throne again, smiling slightly. Odin didn't say anything else, but just paused the eternal spear in his hand, and then directly dragged Loki, who was still on Earth, to his side. A rainbow bridge connected heaven and earth, bringing the three back to where they were supposed to be. While doing all this, Odin did not pay attention to Kesha for a moment, as if Kesha was no longer in his sight. As for Kesha, she was only somewhat interested in the so-called Rainbow Bridge, but that was just some interest. After all, it was rare to turn space technology into a direct lethal weapon. But for angels, it is not very useful. How can a star-destroying weapon be so inconvenient? The 8-legged divine horse stepped on the land of Asgard, and Odin took a deep breath. Using the Rainbow Bridge twice in such a short time, even he was a little overwhelmed. Dark energy was too much of a burden for his current body. He got off his horse and looked at Loki, who had been controlled. Odin's one eye showed a little kindness, but it was fleeting. In Asgard, he was not only the father of Thor and Loki, but also the king of Asgard. Loki had done something like that, so he would not be able to escape the blame safely. He waved his hand, and the Asgardian guards took Loki away. He was not in the mood to talk to Loki right now, and that guy probably wouldn't talk to him properly. If they had another conversation in the treasury, Odin really didn't know if he could survive it. Besides, when did such a guy appear in the 9 realms? I really don't know whether it is a blessing or a curse. Thinking of the woman sitting on the throne and talking to him calmly, Odin couldn't help but frown. Looking back at Thor, who was brought back by himself, this child is not yet a match for that woman. In fact, he will be suppressed by that woman for a long time. Father. Thor still noticed Odin's gaze. He didn't understand why his father took them back to Asgard. The cosmic cube was still in the woman's hands. It was unreasonable for him to leave without taking it back. Odin patted the neck of the eight-legged divine horse, and Sleipnir naturally understood what Odin meant and walked away slowly. Odin looked at Sleipnir walking away slowly and turned to Thor, who looked confused, and said, "Do you mind walking with me?" After saying that, he didn't care whether Thor agreed or not, and walked straight towards the broken rainbow bridge. Thor, who was carrying Mjolnir, didn't want to waste any time and hurried to keep up with Odin's pace in case he missed any news. He didn't believe that Odin was just walking with him. Maybe he had some relationship with that woman. The two walked one after the other on the road to the rainbow bridge. Odin did not speak, and Thor did not ask why. They seemed to be just taking a walk, but they were not wearing ordinary clothes, but armor for battle. When they finally arrived at the broken rainbow bridge, Heimdall, the gatekeeper who was guarding here because of the broken rainbow bridge, left here at some point. As the gatekeeper of Asgard, he would never leave the gate of Asgard without the order from the king. Since Heimdall was not seen here, it can only be said that Odin had asked him to leave early. The universe is beautiful, isn't it? Odin smiled as he described the scenery he was seeing. The broken rainbow bridge was still shining with colorful light, which was a special sight in the vast universe. Thor nodded, not commenting on Odin's words. At their level of life, if they just wanted to see the scenery of the universe would be an extremely beautiful scenery for them. The more beautiful something is, the more dangerous it is. Odin looked at Thor and left after saying this. Although Thor was not a wise man, he was definitely not a pure reckless man. Looking at the starry sky, Thor also turned around and left without saying a word. But this time, his back was quite heavy as he left. It was the heavy realization of one's own insignificance. At this moment on Earth, the Avengers did not sit together and taste something they had never eaten before, as Stark had expected. Sitting in the top floor office of Stark Building, no one spoke. Even though a superwar had ended, no one was happy. They had watched everything that happened in outer space through the surveillance satellites, including the rainbow bridge that descended from the sky and the night that emerged from it. In just a moment, Thor was taken away by the man who looked like Odin. Even Loki, who was imprisoned on Earth, was taken away at that moment. As for the cosmic cube, no one would mention that thing anymore. Everyone here had chosen to forget that the cosmic cube was still in the hands of the woman in silver armor. Stark would even be happy to see that the cosmic cube did not return to human hands or to S.H.I.E.L.D. The return of that thing would only make those guys continue to want to develop so-called deterrent weapons. Anyone want a drink? Stark stood up and walked towards the bar in his office. There were many expensive drinks on display, and a bottle of them would cost more than a white-collar worker's annual salary. No one answered Stark. It seems I'm the only one who drank. Stark took down a bottle of whiskey and poured himself a glass with a calm expression. When Stark shook the glass, the amber liquor hit the wall of the glass. The sound of the liquor hitting the glass could be heard clearly by everyone in this quiet environment. Aren't you worried at all? Captain America Steve Rogers was completely disgusted with Stark's state. There was another guy of unknown origin in outer space, eyeing the Earth covetously. Why was he so relaxed all of a sudden? Steve stood up from his chair abruptly, staring at Stark, who was enjoying the wine in his glass. No one knows if that woman has any bad intentions. What if she wants to invade the Earth too? She could have killed me today, you know that? Stark calmly put down the wine glass in his hand and said to Steve with a calm face. Stark's words choked Steve. No one knew why Stark lost all his energy and fell straight down. Not to mention an old guy who has been frozen for 70 years. Walking in front of Steve, Stark faced the Captain America, who was regarded as a perfect man by his father. That woman hacked into my armor system in an instant, do you understand? Instantly. Stark roared at Steve, after hacking into my armor, she could directly detonate the arc reactor on my chest. The super soldier, who was praised as the most perfect, could not help but look away at this moment, and could not continue to look at Stark. Shrugging, Stark said in a very frivolous voice, "Don't you understand? They don't take us seriously. Then we can't be unprepared." A deep voice came from the mouth of a man who walked out of the elevator. The black leather long windbreaker, coupled with his black eye patch, always gave people the feeling of a medieval pirate. If it weren't for his skin color, it might be even more like a medieval pirate. Such a person turned out to be the current director of the former Strategic Scientific Corps, now known as S.H.I.E.L.D. Stark had never had a good impression of this guy, whether it was the previous private invasion of other people's homes or the later placement of agents around him. Nick Fury's image score with Stark has never been high. In the entire S.H.I.E.L.D., only the now deceased Coulson has a good relationship with him. The playboy stopped talking to Steve and returned to the bar, picking up his glass and taking a sip. He ignored Nick Fury's words. But among the Avengers here, there were two agents who originally belonged to S.H.I.E.L.D. The gorgeous red-haired girl and the capable short-haired man nodded to Nick Fury. Nick Fury didn't care about Stark's attitude at all and just waved the document in his hand in front of everyone's eyes. I don't know if any of you would like to know about the new proposal of the World Security Council. Glancing at the Avengers sitting here, Nick Fury casually placed the document on the table beside him. Stark just smiled. He could guess what those guys were going to do with that document. Wasn't it because they thought that the cosmic cube couldn't be left in the hands of that unknown guy? They probably discussed how to deal with that woman. Tony, pour me a drink. Banner stood up and walked toward Stark. Originally, he didn't want to get involved in this matter. If S.H.I.E.L.D. hadn't brought him back, he would still be in Kolkata, India. Looking at the two guys who had already started discussing which brand of wine tasted better, Nick Fury couldn't help feeling a little unhappy. But his good cultivation skills didn't make anyone feel that there was anything wrong. Or maybe it has something to do with his skin color. There are also guys who are interested in the new resolution of the World Security Council, such as the American soldier in a tight uniform. Steve picked up the document and looked at the cover but didn't get any useful information. It just had a file serial number. He opened the document and frowned more and more. From beginning to end, Steve didn't see any fear in those guys in this document. They only saw the benefits and powerful force that the cosmic cube could bring them. Steve took his eyes off the document and looked at the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. in front of him. They don't know, don't you understand? Nick Fury looked straight at Steve. I know very well. When I came out of the conference room, I already knew that woman was not someone that the Earth could afford to mess with. Why did you bring out this kind of document? I can't stop the Security Council's resolution. They will always find the right time to push this matter forward. Nick Fury was a bachelor and didn't feel anything at all. After all, this matter was not his doing, but those big men took the lead. What's more, when he went to the meeting, he didn't know that the woman could directly take out the energy-exploding cosmic cube. If I had known this earlier, I would never have agreed to the implementation of this proposal. Let me guess, are you asking for a dialogue with that woman? And if the dialogue fails, then threaten with force. But what weapon can threaten a guy outside the orbit of the Earth and the Moon? Stark suddenly interrupted and made his own reasonable guess about the document in Steve's hand. Oh, by the way, you have a weapon developed with the cosmic cube. Maybe they can hit that woman. Banner, who was also drinking on the other side, didn't say anything, but the emotion revealed in his eyes clearly showed his distrust of S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Security Council. They don't know how terrifying it is to break through the defense system of Stark armor in an instant. They only think about whether they can get what they want by their own means. Are you scared? Natasha, who had been silent all the time, suddenly spoke. Her keen grasp of emotions allowed her to feel Stark's inner confusion. A conceited playboy would actually feel this way at this time. After listening to Natasha's words, Stark said calmly, "Yes, I am afraid." As someone who could confront Congress directly, Stark said this without changing his expression. I know you have excellent computer skills. I'll give you a supercomputer. How long will it take you to break into my armor system? Stark asked Natasha. Natasha was silent. It was not that she had not heard what Stark had said to Steve before. Instantly breaking through Stark's armor system, let alone using supercomputers to deal with it, even if all the scientific researchers of S.H.I.E.L.D. were brought in, they could only tie with Stark's artificial intelligence at best. Stop talking? Stark raised his glass and took another sip. Dang, the glass was placed back on the marble surface of the bar with a crisp sound. I don't know how strong that woman's technological capabilities are, but I believe that if she wants to know something, she will definitely know it. No one can stop her. Stark patted Banner's shoulder beside him. What do you think? Banner nodded. Stark could break into S.H.I.E.L.D.'s database in a few hours and expose S.H.I.E.L.D.'s underwear. What if it was that woman? Should it be measured in milliseconds or microseconds? Moreover, Stark and that woman had no close contact or touch from the beginning. The system was broken through in the air. It proved that the woman didn't need to have any connection with the target she wanted to attack, and she could simply and crudely get all the information in a way they didn't know. Nick Fury frowned and said nothing. Sir, I think you'd better take a look at this thing. Jarvis' voice rang out in the room. A controllable image was projected by Jarvis. Outside the orbit of the Earth and the Moon, a huge celestial body full of technology suddenly appeared. Jarvis, how big is that thing? Is it moving? Stark no longer had the heart to say anything to the guys from S.H.I.E.L.D. The most important thing at the moment was no longer the Security Council's resolution, but something beyond the Earth-Moon orbit. Just from the projection, Stark had already felt how huge that thing was. If this thing fell down, humans would just follow in the footsteps of the dinosaurs. It's about 30 kilometers high and 40 kilometers wide. If you don't count the wing-shaped device, it's about 10 kilometers wide. Its trajectory is the same as the Earth's orbit. After Jarvis spoke, the only sound in the room was the breathing of the people. That thing was no longer the sword of Damocles. It was something that could actually become the source of the destruction of the world. Nick Fury, slumped in his chair, kept rubbing his swollen brow. He had been communicating with the Security Council for several days, just for the artificial celestial body in the sky. They tried every possible way to get some data about the artificial celestial body, but all the methods proposed were completely useless. However, no one mentioned any so-called military deterrence this time. The previously agreed proposals had become paper in the trash can when the artificial celestial body appeared. They were worthless, and even using a shredder would be considered a waste of electricity. They had no way to get close to the artificial celestial body, whether it was a satellite or something else. They could only roughly measure the individual data of the object. But they didn't know what the object was used for. They didn't know whether it had a weapon system. They didn't know what technology the woman used to transport the artificial celestial body. The Scientific Research Department of S.H.I.E.L.D. has completely stumbled on the artificial celestial body. How can they explain something that they cannot understand at all? And now it is the 7th day since the artificial celestial body appeared. For a whole week, no one in S.H.I.E.L.D. has slept well. No one knows what the specific purpose of the artificial celestial body is. Whether it is for surveillance, to conquer the Earth by force, or to destroy the planet, no one knows. They didn't know if they would be able to see their ceiling tomorrow or if they closed their eyes tonight. The reconstruction of New York City should have started long ago, but with something hanging in the sky that could destroy human civilization at any time, no one had the energy to implement those things. Not everyone. Stark is now helping the engineering teams that have received orders from the municipal government to make some portable and easy-to-use processing tools. He doesn't care whether the thing in the sky will fall or not, and completely ignores it. Although Nick Fury had asked Stark for help, that guy completely ignored all his messages. He didn't know if they had already gone moldy in Stark's message box. Ding! The communicator on the table rang, and the red light that represented someone looking for him was flashing continuously. In the past 7 days, he had no idea how many times he had seen the red light flash, and not once had it brought him good news. Who knows what bad news the red light brought this time? Nick Fury picked up the call casually and didn't think of speaking. No matter who called, they would probably speak before him. Director, we have discovered traces of biological activity on artificial celestial bodies. The voice on the communicator was quite excited, and they are directly active on the surface of the celestial body. Bang! Nick Fury could no longer conceal his shock. He stood up suddenly and even overturned his chair. If there were organisms on artificial celestial bodies, did that mean that the thing could provide the necessary conditions for biological activities? Back then, that woman could move directly on Earth, proving that she could definitely survive on a planet with an atmosphere. Now that there were organisms on her celestial body, did that mean that there was something like an atmosphere on that body? This technology can directly act on celestial bodies, and is completely different from the technology that humans currently use indoors. With this technology, it is no longer a hypothesis for humans to leave the solar system. Technology is good technology, but those who possess it are not necessarily friends of the Earth. Nick Fury wanted to talk a little more, but another red light came on. That was a signal that the Security Council wanted to see him now. When I get back from the meeting, I will go to the Science Department to take a closer look at this matter. Nick Fury said and switched the line to the Security Council signal. I am Nick Fury. The Security Council is online. Maria Hill's cold voice came from the communicator. I understand. Hill, I need you to go to the Science Department and observe with your own eyes whether there are really living things on that artificial celestial body. Nick Fury hung up the communication directly after saying this. He believed that Hill would definitely carry out this matter well. She is the most perfect executor in S.H.I.E.L.D. No matter from which aspect, Hill is absolutely the wrong person. Nick Fury looked at the chair that fell to the ground because of him and left the office directly without picking it up. He put on a black windbreaker and walked quickly to the meeting place with the Security Council. Maria Hill, on the other side, did not delay and headed directly to the science department after receiving the order from the director. On the so-called artificial celestial body on Earth, a pretty figure was sitting on the edge, looking at the blue planet not far away with an arrogant look on her face. With her high golden ponytail and bangs covering her face, she looks like a middle school girl. If you really ignore the silver armor on her and the wings behind her, you can probably identify her as a middle school girl. Bullshit artificial celestial body, they don't even have a name for it. Lang was really not happy about those guys calling the objects under them so-called artificial celestial bodies. Sister Lang, there's no need to be unhappy. An angel with her blonde hair braided into a thick big pigtail slowly walked to Lang's side and said to her with a smile, "They are just a pre-nuclear civilization, and it is still difficult for them to reach the level of angels." The pigtailed angel slowly sat down beside Lang and looked at the beautiful blue planet like Lang. Lang didn't say anything, just said, "It's a pity that this beautiful planet is occupied by such a group of guys." The pigtailed angel just smiled and didn't say anything. "When I think that there are no more scums and demons here, I feel something is wrong." Lang moved his shoulders and said with some regret, "Etienne, do you feel the same way?"